We're now on Daf Mem Vavam in Beis, and we are studying the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. When does Rav reject Shmuel? Kamma says the following: if we're talking about a case where the mocher, the seller, is bankrupt, so that when the lokech demands his rebate on what he paid because he was tricked, he thinks he was fooled in buying a shor that's not worthy of charisha, but he can't get his money back for the mocher, that money is long gone, it's been spent, is then lishkale l'torah bezuze. He should take the shor itself back as a replacement for the mos. So assuming he paid 100 for that shor, the shor is worth 100, he'll get back his money in the form of the shor itself. The Amri Inchi, and this is a reflection of an idiomatic phrase that people use, Mimore Rishvasach Hare Yifra. From the person that owes me, I will collect. In other words, even though I would rather collect cash and get back my money, but nevertheless, if that's all I could get is some second-rate property, but that property has a market value, that's what I'll get. So therefore, the Gemara wants to know, what is the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel? If we're going to assume that the mocher cannot pay back and rebate the money, he's now bankrupt, then both Rav and Shmuel are going to say the same thing, that let the lokeach get the shor. Lo tzricha de'ikel ishtalume minei. No, we're talking about a case where the mocher has mos in the bank. The lokeach wants to collect those mos in lieu of the fact that he was tricked into the sale. It was a purchase under false premises. Rav Omar Reza Mekatos, which basically means that the lokeach will give back the shor. This is not the shor that I bargained for. And the mocher will reimburse him for the money he paid for the shor. And why does Rav insist that it's a mekachtos? Zilbas aruba, aruba de inchi l'radya hu dezavni. Most people, when they buy an ox, they buy it as a work animal. Shmuel Amar Yochal Yitzhayomer Lo L'Shchita Machartiv L'Cha V'Lo Azlina Bas Aruba. So therefore, according to Shmuel, the mocher is allowed to retain the money, and the lokeach does not have the ability to negate and invalidate the sale, despite the rov that supports the claim of the lokeach. So what does the Torah mean according to Shmuel when it says Achrei Rabim Lahatos, that you rely on a rov? That's B'Isura. In Dinei Isa V'Heter, you don't know whether this animal was shechted properly or not, so you have a rov to assume it was shechted properly, meat is mutter, then we rely on rov. But b'mamono lo azlina basa ruba. We're not going to remove money from the muchzak who's in possession of money based on rov. Rov doesn't operate. Ella hamotzi mechavel of haraya. You have to bring edim, and rov is not a sufficient piece of evidence to support the motzi. Now, we might want to add the following point. While it's true, according to Shmuel's logic, and we'll see if Shmuel based himself on a pasuk or not, that hamotzi mechaver of raya, even against the rov, but that's not exactly true because the Torah does rely on rov in dinei mamonos. Let's say, for example, I claim that you owe me such and such amount of money, and we take it in front of a beis din. And let's say the beis din has 3 judges. The Torah says that the deciding vote will be the majority rules, that we go basa rov. So you see that rov operates in dinei mamonos as well. But we're going to have to differentiate between rov as a clarification, what we call a birur, and rov in beis din, which is not a matter of birur. We're not using the rov to clarify, but rather we're establishing the ruling based on the rov. And it's almost as if every single judge agreed based on the decision of the majority. Tanya Nami Hachi, we also have a brisa shor shenogach sapara v'nimtza ubra b'tzida. So we're going to bring a riot to support Shmuel. So we're talking about a case of a shor that killed a para, and now we find the uber dead. Ve'eno yodea im ad shelo nogcha yolda im isha nogcha yolda. Did the later take place before the negicha, and therefore the negicha had no impact on the death of the velados? Or did the vlad die after the negicha, meaning as a result of the negicha, the attack killed not only the mother but also its fetus? Is mishalim chatzi nezek lepara urevia nezek levlad divrei sumchus. Sumchus is going to apply the principle of mammon amutal b'safek cholkim, and therefore you pay half the nezek for the para. The para for sure was a mazik, that we have no doubt. The suffix is really on the vlad, and therefore, notice we don't know if the shor killed the vlad, is therefore pay half of what you would normally pay if we knew for sure that the shor killed the vlad. And if we knew for sure that the shor killed the vlad, it's the shor tam, you pay chatzi nezek. Now we're going to divide it in half, and it comes out to a quarter of a nezek. Chachamim omrim amotzi mechaver levaraya. Omer Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Minayin lemotzi bechaver levaraya. Rabbi Shmuel thinks that you cannot establish this overriding principle in Dinim Ominous without a pasuk. There's got to be a pasuk for it. Shenemar, pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, it says, Mi bal dvarim yigash alehem. In other words, the person who's putting forth a taina against his friend, a claim against his friend, he has to bring a raya. Yigash alehem means he has to bring a raya of two edim to support his taina. Yagish raya alehem, alehem means for the bezdin. So he has to bring two witnesses to support his claim. And yigash means in the presence of bezdin. Maskif lo Rav Ashi. What do you mean? You need a pasuk for this? Lamali cross svaro. And again, he uses an idiomatic phrase to sort of convey the mashal and imshal of what this svara is all about. The koivle ke'eva, a person is suffering from some sort of a physical pain. Azil asya. So he goes to the house of the Rofe, and he says, I have a pain here, I have a pain here, wherever he has the pain. Now, the Rofe is not going to be able to solve the problem of the Chola until the Chola specifies exactly where he's suffering, where is his pain. So too in the Nimshal, Bezdin cannot be motzi mama michaskaso until the Toveas shows and proves with clarity through Eidim that so-and-so owes him money. So the Tovea, the plaintiff, as we call it in English, has the burden of proof against the defendant. Ella cross, so you'll ask me, what do we need this pasuk for? The pasuk now becomes superfluous because it's been replaced by a svara. Look at Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua, the Amar Nachman Amar Ravua, Minayin she'en niskokim el toveat chila, shenemer mi bal dvarim yigash aleim, yagish dvarov aleh. So let's say, for example, Ruvain has a very solid claim, we'll see what that means in a second, against Shimon, that Shimon owes him a certain amount of money. Now, Shimon claims that there's other monies that he gave to Ruvain, like, for example, a mashka, we'll see about in a minute, and therefore he's already paid up his debt to Ruvain. So the halacha derived from this pasuk of mi bal dvarim yigash tchila, yigash aleim, is that first Ruvain successfully puts forward his claim. And Bezdin now, based on the claim of Ruvain supported his claim with witnesses. Now Shimon will have to pay. Shimon claims he already paid. He gave a mashkon, a collateral, whatever it might be. Shimon now will turn the table, and he becomes the toveh. He now is the plaintiff putting forth a claim against Reuven. But first, we will decide on Reuven's claim against Shimon, that Shimon owes him money. Shimon wants to claim, no, I don't owe you. Then he'll have to register another claim in the courts. Now, Tosfos points out that Reuven, if he's going to collect from Shimon, he has to have a shtar. He has to have some edus to prove that Shimon owes him money. If he doesn't have a shtar, Shimon is believed to say, I paid you up. And we're not going to register Reuven's claim and rule in favor of Reuven just because he claims that Shimon owes him money. If Reuven has nothing to substantiate his claim, and Shimon says, I paid you up, that's it. The ball game is over right there. There's no claim of Reuven that has to be adjudicated. However, on Masechet Bava Kamma, there's a Shita Mekubetzes, and he quotes Rabbeinu Simcha, one of the Rishonim. And he says the following: even if Reuven doesn't have a shtar, and Shimon is believed to say parati, but the very moment that Shimon says parati, he tacitly consents or admits, let's say, that he borrowed money from Reuven. At that point, we're going to give a ruling based on the principle of Hodas Baldin K'mei Edim Domi, that there was a confession on the part of Shimon that Achen, he really did borrow the money. Now he puts forth a claim that he paid back the Chov. Well, now he has to put forth a new claim. And in fact, it's going to be a problem for Shimon now, because Shimon is Neman to say parati with a migu that he could have said lo hoya dvar me'olam, because Reuven is not holding a shtar against. But now we've already established that Reuven has a valid claim based on the implicit confession of Shimon when he said parati, and now Shimon doesn't have a migu to say lo hoya dvar me'olam. Tosfos says that Shimon claims that I paid you back in front of Ploni Uploni. There were two Eidim there who witnessed my return of the money to you. And we have reason to believe that there are such Eidim, and therefore, if not for this pasuk, we would say that, you know, he's identifying two Eidim. He calls them, you know, John and Larry. And therefore, we should wait and not do anything until John and Larry show up in Bezdin. We should freeze everything. And we should wait even a long period of time until finally, let's say these two Eidim, you know, John and Larry come back from a long trip to Greece, you know, till they return. And apparently we give them up to 30 days and so forth and so on. Now, there's another discussion here, which we're not going to get into here. What if Reuven is claiming against Shimon that he assaulted him, which is called Chavola, and Shimon counters that, you know what, I have other claims against him. So he may have a claim against me, but I have other claims against him. So first, basically, is going to paskin on Reuven's claim against Shimon, and then we'll worry about Shimon's counterclaims against Reuven. Amri Nardoi, Pa'omer shenis kakim lanitbat chiyuv. There are situations in which Bezdin will take into consideration the claim of the defendant. Hechidomi, in what situation? Because zile nichse. Let's say, for example, Shimon claims he gave collateral to Reuven, a mashkon. The mashkon has become on the market a very valuable, what's the word I'm looking for?
Commodity.
That people are looking to buy it.
Commodity.
But what's the word? An adjective for a commodity that's in demand. People, everybody's looking for it now. It's a certain kind of automobile, and now it became the most popular automobile. So somebody's offering him a glob of money because this particular object is in demand. So what are we going to do now? We're going to paskin like Reuven against Shimon and hand down a ruling that Shimon owes money to Reuven. Then Shimon is going to have to come back and register his claim against Reuven that he gave him a collateral, he gave him this beautiful car. And in the meantime, all the buyers, the potential buyers, skip town. So Shimon is going to suffer a loss because Bezdin were being very obstinate, and they're not willing to hear his counterclaim. So in such a case, we're not going to just close shop on Reuven's claim against Shimon. We're going to allow Shimon to put forward his counterclaim, and we'll judge the two claims one against the other. The Mishnah says, "V'chein parsha nagches hashor." Now it's a case where the cow attacks an ox, and the cow is pregnant, and we don't know when the Vlad was born. Was it before the Negicha or after the Negicha? Which means, how much value does the Shar HaMazik, in this case the Para HaMazika, have such that the Nizak could collect, in the case of a Tam, from Gufa. And the Mishnah established that Chatzi Nezek Uravian Nezek. Frek the Gemara, Upalga Nizka Hu Deboy L'Shlume. I don't get it. What are you saying? That he gets Palga the Nizka from the Para and another additional quarter of the Nezek from the Vlad. All told, he's going to get 75% of the Nezek. And we know that a short time maxes out at 50%. The Kuli Nizka Nechi Riva Maya Vidite. 100% minus a quarter. What's going on? That's 75%. So we're going to have here a machlokas Abai v'Rava how to interpret our Mishnah. We can't take the Mishnah at face value. Omar Abai. Abai says that the Mishnah never had in mind that the Nizak should get 3/4 of the Nezek, but Chatzi Nezek. Max is Chatzi Nezek. So let's say the Shar HaNizak was worth 100, the maximum that he can collect the Baal Shar Nizak is 50. So what did the Mishnah mean here? In other words, now Abai has the challenge of fitting this all into the language of the Mishnah. Echad me'arba b'nezek. Now, echad me'arba is the same as a quarter, 25%, and yet the Mishnah calls it chatzi nezek. So what does that mean? Chatzi me'atashlumin shemutolim al bala par l'shalem. If the Vlad was already born before the attack, so that the Nizak, the Baal Ashura Nizak, could collect 50% of the Baal Hapara. And what does the Mishnah mean when it says Ravia Nezek? An additional quarter of the Nezek from the Vlad is Echad Mishmona B'Nezek. 1/8. So I have here in the Masifta, he works this out in numbers. He says the following. The para itself is worth 80 zuz. But when you add the vlad, then its market value goes up by 20% to 100 zuz. So now the para together with the vlad is worth 100. But we don't know whether or not the rights of the nizak include the extra 20 zuzim of the vlad. So we're going to split that in half. So at the end of the day, if let's say the Shara Nizak that was killed is worth 200 and he should be getting 100, he's only going to get 90. Why? He's going to get 80 from the para because the par itself was certainly guilty of attacking the shar, and the par was worth 80. But on the additional 20, we're going to have to split it in half, which means that we're only going to add another 10 to allow the nizak to collect ksach hakol, all told 90. So he, in effect, he collects less than chatzi nezek. And Abai continues. He says, "Ve'i para uvlad dechad ninhu." If both the para and the vlad, you see, they had situations in which Ruvain owned the para, the mother, and Shimon owned the vlad. So first, what if both the para and the vlad are owned by one person? Para uvlad dechad minayu. Hachinami demotzi amalei lebala para. The nizak, whose shar was killed by the para, could say to the bala para, "Mimanav shachatzi nezik havli." I couldn't care less whether you add the vlad and its value or you subtract it. Meaning, at the time of the attack, the para was pregnant or wasn't pregnant. Irrelevant. Because as far as the para mimonevshach, no matter what, you owe me chatzi nezek to the value of the para. And if the chatzi nezek is 100, the para is worth 80, then he has a right to collect 80 from the shar. I'm sorry, from the para hamaz. Elolot tzricha. So when are we going to say that we split the para? Because the Mishnah says, "Mishtalim chatzi nezek min hapara." And the answer is, says Abai, the para dechad uvlad dechad. One person owns the para, and another person owns the vlad. Ve'ida kodim tave. If the nisa comes over to the bala para first and puts his claim, presents his claim against the bala para, hachinami ti omer le. The nisa could certainly say to the bala para di doch as ziktan. There's no question that your para was responsible for attacking my shar. So therefore, you for sure have to pay me. Now you're claiming that the Vlad was also a partner in the Negicha, and therefore the Bala Vlad should also be sued for damages, and he should be mishtatif in the amount of Tashlim HaNezek. Is Havli Raya de Islacha Shutfe. We know that you for sure, the Balapara, were guilty of attacking my shar. You want to say that there was someone else who participated in the attack? You have the burden of proof. So you have to pay me chatzi nezek until you can prove that the Vlad was there alive in its mother's stomach when the attack was perpetrated. Ella, So what would be a case where the Baal Havlad would be liable for payment? The Kodim Tave LeBaal Havlad Tchila. The lawyers taught the Nizak, the owner of the shor that died, to do a clever thing and first approach the Baal HaNizak. I'm sorry, the Baal Havlad. The Amalei. Now the Baal HaShor, I'm sorry, I keep saying shor, I mean the Baal HaPara. It's a very strange case where the para is the masik, right? So the Baal HaPara, that could turn to the Nizak, meaning to the Baal HaShor, and say to him, look, Lisa, I take the Shutfasa Isle. The very fact that you approach the Baal HaVlad first indicates that you concede that the Baal HaVlad was also a Shutaf, was alive and well at the time of the Negicha, and he's a partner in the Negicha. And therefore, I don't have to pay you, says the Baal HaPara to the Baal HaShor, more than 25% of the Nezek. And the other 25%, maxing out a 50% Chatzi Nezek, go claim it from the Baal HaVlad. Now, when he goes back to claim to the Baal HaVlad, well, the blood of, well, we don't know for sure that the Baal HaVlad was a Shutaf, was a partner in the Nezek, and therefore he can only collect what would be half of a quarter from the blood of Vlad, which would be 1/8. Ika Diamri, others interpret the mission in a different way. Afal gav the kodim tave lebala paratchila. Even if the Nizak first claimed the first sued the Bala Para for Chatzi Nezek, Motzi Madchile. The Bala Para could still push off the Tvia of the Bala Shor, the Omalei, and he says to the Nizak, the Bala Para, the Bala Shor, Meida Yadi, the Shutfa Isli. I know for a fact that the Para was pregnant at the time of the attack, and therefore the Bala Vlad is also a Shutaf in this Hezek. And the birth of the Vlad took place after the Negicha. Now the Bala Para is Muchzak. The Para also has what's called a Cheskas Mu'uberes, and until we know for sure it gave birth, we assume it hasn't yet given birth. And therefore, in this case, Sumchas will be moded that Amotzi Mecharer L'Raya, that the Nizak cannot collect from the Bala Para more than 1/4 of the Nezek. And for the blood of Vlad, another 8. Omar Rav rejects this interpretation of Abai. Atu echad me'arba ben nezek v'echad mishmona ben nezek tani. Does the Mishnah say anything about the Baal HaPar paying a reva nezek, a quarter, and the Baal Havlad paying an 1/8? What does it say in the Mishnah? Chatzi nezek or revia nezek? The Mishnah speaks about half and a quarter, not a quarter and an 1/8. Let's go back to our original premise that both the Par and the Vlad were owned by one individual. And this is how we're going to explain the Mishnah. Isa lepara, if the para is alive and well in front of us, mishtalim chatzi nezek min hapara, collect half a nezek min hapara. Because the para definitely was a mazika, and you should be able to collect chatzi nezek from the para. However, here we're on Mim Zayin, less a para, if the par is not here, or let's say the par is worth less than chatzi nezek, now Tom only pays me gufa, and therefore the Baal HaShor HaNizog could not collect his chatzi nezek for the par because the par is not here, or the par is not worth that much. Therefore, he's now going to move his claim over to the Baal Vlad, and demand chatzi nezek from the bridal vlad. But again, it's only one person. It's not two persons. Now, the vlad itself is safek hizik, safek lo hizik, because we don't know when it was born. Is mishtalim revia nezek min vlad. The nizak has rights to collect nothing more than 1/4 of the nezek from the vlad. So the Mishnah doesn't mean to say that he also collects chatzi nezek from the para, all told 75%. But rather, he could be gova either chatzi nezek min para or reva nezek min vlad. But he can't get both. He doesn't have his cake and eat it too. And the Gemara now is going to be medayik according to Rav. Taimo. The reason why he collects from the vlad only reva nezek is the lo yadinin havi vlad ba'ada ki nokha ilav. Was the vlad alive and participated in the hezek? Aval ip shitalon. If let's say we know for sure, for all certainty, that havi vlad ba'ada, that the para was pregnant at the time of the negicha, ki nokha, at the time of the negicha, is mishtalim kule chatzi nezek min vlad. Then the nizak has recourse to collect from the vlad itself, and we're talking about the full chatzi nezek. Why is this so? Rava l'tamei di'omer Rava parashi zika gova mivlada. When a para, which is a pregnant cow, attacks, the nizak can now collect from the vlad, my timer, gufahi. And now Rava applies the principle called ubar yerech imo. The vlad is considered part of the guf, an extension of the body of the para itself. And therefore, just like he collect from the thigh of the para, his entire chatzi nezek, he can likewise collect from the vlad his entire chatzi nezek. However, Tarnagola zika, and let's say a Tarnagolis had a pail that was tied down to its foot, and that's called sroros, because it broke a vessel, is the nizak enagova mi beit sasa. He cannot collect from the eggs. My timer. What's the reason that the beitzas tarnagolas you cannot collect? You collect it from the vlad of the para. Is pirsha bi'alma. It's not considered part of the animal's body, such that he could collect migufa. It's a davar nifrad umufrash miguf hatarnagolas. Okay, this is where we'll stop for today.